This is Empowered Human Academy. Welcome home.
I think the person who invents things or creates things and stuff oftentimes gets eaten up by a lot of middlemen monetizing it, and I would try to break that down as much as I can to let the creator be upfront.
This is about love. This is about light. This is about the idea that you have everything you will ever need.
And this life of yours, this is where you grow, you expand, and you remember who you really are.
I'm Abe.
I'm Isaac.
In Empowered Human Academy, we join with humans of all kinds to feel the inspiration that can only come with empowered living.
The stories you hear today are unique, but the energy you hear today belongs to you too. So, with hearts wide open, let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Empowered Human Academy. Today we have a special guest, someone who's been in Isaac's life for a while, Jake Nickel, the founder and CEO of Threadless. And we are so excited to have you today, Jake. Thank you so much. How's it going? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. You know, it's Tuesday here in the middle of June, so just kind of living up the summer.
I feel that. Same over here, and I'm happy that you're having that experience over there. Also, your space is... Actually, no, we're going to wait to talk about all the things that I see in your office until later. We begin, as we always do, with the question of identity. Not when you're presenting to other people, not when you're looking to strike an impression, but when you're coming home to yourself, what words of identity feel like home?
Some of the things that I think of is, husband, adventurer, a dad, entrepreneur. That one is a little weird for me. Took me a while to pronounce that word, but maker, I guess I would say more.
Yeah. Those sound immediately sounds like we've got two categories of things. Like husband and dad are very at least to me, they sound very relational, whereas adventurer and entrepreneur, maybe less so, but maybe that's not the case for you. What's the balance for you between thinking of yourself in terms of relationships and what's between you and the world versus what you are here doing? Or maybe there's no difference. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they overlap a bit. I mean,
okay.
My wife and I kind of started the company together. I mean, we started dating before I even started Threadless over 20 years ago. And, it does kind of feel like a family business in that way. And, the kids are heavily involved as well. And just, it's a kind of a part of our lives, but also the adventure side, I think, goes back to, my dad started a Boy Scout troop growing up and went through all that and became an Eagle Scout. And I think the overlap of adventure and leadership and creating things and stuff kind of came together through that experience of scouting. Just camping a lot and doing, biking and hiking and climbing and even just making meals together and doing the dishes and as building that bonding with other people and making things together has always been a big part of my life.
Yeah. I was working at Threadless around the time when y'all brought out the Make branding. And I know that word has a lot of importance, with that company, and I would assume with you, but that's where I'm going with this question. What does it mean to make for you? What's your definition of that, and what's your relationship to it?
For me, it's tied to my own personal well-being and happiness. I think so long as I'm creating things, it's just I feel like I'm in a better headspace. I went many years actually without committing code on Threadless, and now I've gone back to where I'm coding again. I just feel so much better, I'm building things. But not just code, but I've always had a side project going, and for a while that was websites, but I haven't been doing that as much. It's more even just making a tree fort or putting a dock out in the lake. We go up to the lake in Wisconsin a lot, and just kind of getting my hands dirty on stuff is really important. Yeah. And that definitely ties into Threadless in a big way, especially in the origin.
Yeah, totally. Tell me about the origin. How did this thing come to be?
Well, was really just a hobby. It was never meant to be a business. And I was kind of spending a lot of my time in this forum online called Dreamless, which a bunch of digital artists were sharing their work on there and talking about it. And I realized I never had anything like in the physical world to represent what I was doing there. Like I started out with just some posters on the wall and, t-shirts and stuff. And really just, I was working a full-time job as a web developer while going to school part-time and doing Threadless kind of on the side it was more of a community project, and it took maybe I'd say like 6 years before we started taking it seriously as a business.
Like before you started reshifting your priorities to focus on it, or like what does taking it seriously mean?
Well, so the first 2 years, it was totally a hobby on the side.
Yeah.
The next 2 years, I quit my job and started a web consultancy firm basically called Skinny Corp, building websites for clients. And that Threadless really acted as proof that we knew how to build an e-commerce website, but it wasn't really meant to be a business, I guess. It was still, every dime that came in from t-shirt sales was used to just make more t-shirts. It was never really put to people's salaries or, I didn't even take money out of it. There was a separate bank account for just, and then we were kind of looking at the revenue one year and saw that we made more money was coming in through Threadless than through our client work. And it's funny, the next 2 years, the reason I said 6 years, because we've only talked about 4 years so far, is the next 2 years, we decided, we could just do our own projects. And Threadless we didn't quite grasp it as being the project. We're like, we don't have to do client work. We could just make more websites and more businesses. And we started up like a dozen other businesses before we ended up shutting those down and just focusing on Threadless full time.
Wow. Yeah. When you look back on that timeline, like the Skinny Corp and then the my word, not yours, like the scattershot, trying a bunch of different businesses and then resolving upon the one that wasn't even supposed to be the thing that it is now necessarily. Like how does that feel with the benefit of hindsight when you're looking at all of that?
I think the one thing I'd probably do a little differently is keep it all under one umbrella a little bit more, like rather than, because we were basically launching totally new brands from zero. But this brand Threadless had a lot of, cachet or followers or, customers and stuff that we could have, like we started a separate business called Naked and Angry for pattern-based artwork that we made into things like umbrellas and neckties and wallpaper and dishware and stuff. Like, why wasn't that just Threadless patterns? Why did we start a separate business for that? It was kind of silly.
Yeah. That's some foreshadowing there of stuff y'all might do in the future, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So as somebody, as partners over here who like have a business ourselves, I'm curious, and maybe it's a peer interest, in a sense, not comparing companies whatsoever, but as somebody who has made a thing, and as somebody who is now known for that thing, and you spend a lot of time in that thing, what's the boundary, or what's the boundary? Is there one between like who Jake is and what Threadless is? Speaking for yourself and not anyone else in the company, but like, how do you think about those things?
Yeah, I like to think that I can keep it separate, but I know that's just not the case at all. Okay. Sure. I think if I were to ever step away from Threadless, it would probably be a really hard emotional time to do that.
Sure.
But I don't want to, like when I was talking about it being a family business, I never want to put that pressure on my wife or my kids to ever feel like this is what they have to do with their lives at all. And, Shandi, my wife, has come in and out of the company a bit, and that's totally fine. And if the kids want nothing to do, I also don't want them to feel like they just have a position there too. They got to earn that too. But I feel like I try to think more about why I'm doing Threadless and hold myself to that a little bit more than Threadless itself, which is, I think, a lot of, like, the reason I keep doing it is like how much value we're able to give to artists is just like, if it was just hawking t-shirts for the last 20 years, I would have been out of here a long time ago.
Yeah,
totally.
Working together with artists to help them make money from their artwork is super motivating.
And why is that important to you in your journey? Have you seen like artists' lives been changed, or have you seen the impact in kind of the global art community? Why is it important to you, and why do you continue doing it?
Well, I guess a couple reasons. I think one, self-expression is super important to me, and it was a big part of my life growing up. Like, I moved around a lot as a kid. With my dad was in the Army, so we moved from Army base to Army base, and I kind of started like rebelling quite a bit in high school and writing a lot of graffiti and just listening to a lot of punk rock and making films and stuff. And like, Threadless almost felt like bit of a like sticking it to the man type of thing to me when I first did it, because it was very much democratic. Like anybody, it's a level playing field. Anybody can create anything they want, and if enough people want it, we'll actually make it into a product. And then two, I guess I just feel like creatives. There's a quote by John Adams that says, that I think about a lot. That's like, it was a letter he wrote to his wife during war, and said like, I go to war so that my sons can be sons are politicians so that their sons can be merchants, and their sons will be merchants so that their children can be artists. Like in the end, it's like going down. And I feel very strongly about that like trying to push out. I think the person who invents things or creates things and stuff oftentimes gets eaten up by a lot of middlemen monetizing it. And I would try to like break that down as much as I can to let the creator be upfront.
Amazing. You mentioned a little bit about adventure in leadership. You talked about sticking it to the man. You talked about not even realizing that this would be what it is. What has been your relationship? Oh, and I always I love interviewing and kind of, I coach some leaders, managers, executives. I always love kind of hearing the humanity behind said title, because I think a lot of people just see like CEO or manager or VP and they're just like, they have it all together, or no one really asks about their like personal journey in terms of like internal work along their journey. Professional journey meets personal. So I'm just curious, like you said, adventure and leadership, you said stick it to the man. Did you ever think that you would be a CEO when you started this?
No, not at all. I was not I will say though, I felt like very, I don't know what the right word is, but growing up, I kind of felt like I could do anything. I don't know if this was my parents that instilled this in me, but I felt like I could be a architect or a policeman, like anything. I really did feel like I could figure it out, I guess.
Yeah.
So tell me about your relationship to your own leadership. Has it been hard over time? Have you felt right in that position, or like has it been a kind of a difficult learning journey to kind of find your place in it? You said, I don't know, in the beginning you said entrepreneur, but you said you kind of had a hard time even explaining that in the beginning. What's been your journey in that?
Oh, it's been incredibly difficult. I think probably the biggest issue is the dichotomy between like a maker and a manager, like trying to balance actually creating your product as a business owner and managing and working with the people required to make that product. And I think, for a while, I actually stepped down as CEO of Threadless for maybe 3 or 4 years and hired a CEO and dove into the product side a lot more. But it was kind of through that process that I built back up the confidence to come back into that role. And a lot of it was finding the right support system around me in terms of the heads of every department at Threadless. I'm not the best at, managing, I would say, for one, and I'm not the best at, there's certain roles like on the operations side, financial, legal, stuff like that kind of goes over my head. I don't have like an MBA or anything. I went to art school.
I love it. What helped you build up that confidence then? So, this has probably been a journey of kind of finding yourself as a leader and as a person and as a, all these artists, entrepreneur, father, adventurer, all in one. Like what gives you confidence today in terms of living a life on purpose for yourself?
It's helpful I've become a lot more transparent over the years and just like open about everything going on in the company. I send a daily email to the entire staff about just what's top of mind at any moment. And we share we share like numbers and, we share a lot of information that I don't think a lot of companies would. And I think that helps me. I like getting feedback from all angles and try to I want to make sure the staff is empowered to make decisions on their own and not feel like I have to, and even to hiring, we try to find people who are really comfortable bringing themselves into the role and not just like a cog in our system that can be easily replaceable. But it took many years to build that up, and I'm still not sure. I still don't. It's not like we do everything perfect right now. Sure. And I think there's still more to learn for sure.
And how many employees do you lead now?
We have about 50.
That's cool. Cool. That's really cool.
So as you've gained in confidence, is the way are the priorities behind your decisions, are those the same as they've always been, or have those changed also?
I would say that the priorities definitely shift over time as you grow. And I mean, the hardest thing I ever had to do, it's weird to say have to do it, but we were in a position where we had to we did a layoff, and that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. Probably like pretty large number of staff that we let go after a really bad year. And so it does feel like I feel that pressure to never have to do that again. And so there are priorities that are making sure that we are bringing in, the revenue to support our staff and all of our artist community and all that. So in the early days, it's definitely shifted from being, purely a hobby to there's, a business behind this that we need to support. But I do feel like so long as we're doing right by our artist community, the business is there. So it's still, it's almost like, it's still the motivation behind everything is around helping artists make money. But we know that if we do that, there will be, a strong business behind it all.
I'm curious about the word artist, and the way it's not that I want to avoid talking about Threadless here, but I'm curious about how you feel specifically. Like you're motivated by, it sounds like, about bringing or allowing artists to create value and bring value to them. And also backing up, you've talked about like how self-expression is important to you. Are you, by your own definition, an artist? Like how do you feel with regard to that label? When in the other hand, we're holding like how you think about artists out in the world and how you want to relate to them.
Yeah, I think when I use the term artist with, Threadless artists, it's a lot of times more visual artists, but I mean, one of our number one company value at Threadless is be an artist. And it's not about being a visual artist, but it's about being that individual self of, Seth Godin writes beautifully about artists. He describes artists as like the nurse is an artist when they're, really caring for you, not just beyond their job of like checking your vitals, but, helping you in whatever situation you are. And I think that's how I think about it. That said, I do feel like I'm the next set of an artist as well as a maker or creator, maybe not so much a visual artist, although I know my way around Photoshop and I can draw Hair Jordan.
Amazing.
So what do you, okay, so backing up, and this is possibly a redundant question given everything that we've talked about, but like, what are you here to make? Is there a theme that runs through that? Like, what is Jake making overall?
I guess I like to make things with friends.
Cool.
Make friends and make things with friends and make, and I think specifically, like I try to focus on stuff that helps other creatives. And that, I mean, that's where I've been today. We've also invested in other businesses as Threadless, and that's been our common thread through that too, is finding businesses that are aimed at helping creatives. So I feel like I've become good at that, and I enjoy it. But I also feel like, you know, I love to code. I love to snowboard. And snowboarding is kind of like flow. I've never been in flow other than coding and snowboarding. So,
that sounds really important. Please go on.
Yeah, let's talk about your relationship to your flow.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when I'm able to get completely out of my head. Like there's nothing going on in my head except for that thing that I'm doing in that moment. And I feel like those are the top two things I can think of, where I'm just like full speed down the mountain, like huge turns, and there's something kind of magical about it.
Yeah. Is that something, and here, full disclosure, I'm projecting because flow is something that I'm very interested in myself. And everyone has a different relationship to that, and people value it in different ways. Are those things that you optimize for? Like, I know that you said you spend more time coding on purpose. You're back to it now.
I definitely lose track of time when I'm in flow. And so I need, if I'm going to really work on a coding project, I block off the entire day, you know, and sometimes I'll set up my environment for it too. Like whether it's we have a cabin in Wisconsin that I'll go to by myself and just go work on a project, or hole up here on the third floor for the day. Make sure I bring enough snacks and water to last for a while.
Essentials.
I'm fascinated being married to an engineer, and you're an engineer. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Definitely an introvert.
Okay, so is Isaac. So I'm just so fascinated because you talk about flow like coding, and literally I'm such an extrovert and I need people around me all the time. I'm curious, like, how do you in your flow, and in, you know, whether it be coding or snowboarding, is there a sense of like creativity that emerges, or a sense of inspiration, new ideas in terms of what you can make, or what you are creating in your work, in your personal life? Has there been a time where there has been like an aha moment during a state of flow, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's like in the moment problem solving, maybe. Like one thing as I guess like a leader of Threadless, I try to make sure all developers feel that they can make decisions in the moment without going and getting approval. Cause I think that's one thing that is like, makes things just go so much smoother as a developer, is when you have that autonomy to like, not say, oh, what is the logic here? Do I have to go check that out, or can I use my common sense to do it? Yeah. And the same thing actually applies with snowboarding, when you know, you're constantly monitoring the terrain and where to go next. And I think that it's a combination though, where sometimes I'll feel like, you know, I want to tackle a project, but I haven't yet figured out in my head how I'm going to do it. So I have to just like take a bath or something and figure that out before I could even get on the computer. But then once you get into it, sometimes just like that first step of writing something down in a notebook is enough to start to make that build off into that. So
what I've seen with Isaac, and, you know, what it looks like, you know, you've been talking about, especially with the snowboarding metaphor, I always think that my mind just kind of jumps to like trusting yourself and self-trust and the practice of that. And it's just essentially empowering others to do that. What's been your specific relationship with trusting yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think that that's something that I don't know how I have this trait, but I do have a little bit of a self-confidence that, and it's not necessarily that I know what I'm doing, but that I can figure it out. I mean, I really do feel like most things I can figure out.
And have you seen your your team or your family? Have you been able to like teach people how to do that? For our listeners, people who don't really know how to trust themselves. I know you said like twice now you've been kind of confident your whole life, or, you know, your family upbringing. Cause I think that is a kind of a point, kind of practice, in the whole empowerment game. Like we need to trust ourselves in order to feel empowered in some way. So I'm curious if you have any like practical advice or things that have helped you in the past, even navigate hard things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think in my early years, I had that, and it was almost like ignorance, like that my ignorance I used as a strength, where I didn't know how hard it would be. Like I probably wouldn't have started Threadless if I knew that how hard it is to run a company. And then I think I went through that period where I left as CEO, and where I started to feel kind of like an imposter syndrome, and not really like, and then watching somebody else step into that role who's like very, you know, traditionally trained as a CEO, and watching them make mistakes, I think helped me a lot build back that confidence. And then I actually got to see the CEO of like Uber and Google many years ago meet for the first time on stage and interview each other. And the biggest takeaway at the end is they're both just like, yeah, neither of us really know what we're doing. To hear it from them I thought that was kind of helpful too. But yeah, it's just like understanding that nobody really does have all the answers. And so you're just as equipped as anybody else to do it, I think is very empowering.
And I think like going back to your point of making things and feeling like, you know, and impacting your environment or the things that you are contributing to your space or whatever. I think like creativity, when you don't know what you're doing, creativity and the act of making like empowers you. I mean, if you're just practiced in making things out of, you know, nothing, I think that's I'm even thinking about that. Like, what is it if someone doesn't consider themselves creative or an artist? I'm curious. I mean, this is just theoretical, like how much more confidence people have if they're not an artist or describe themselves versus are. And again, that's a very mass generalization, but I think, you know, sometimes in my past and in our relationship, I've seen Isaac come up with these different ideas in terms of the business or in our life where I'm like, oh, you were really creative in that solution. And that's because he's doing that all the time with his work. I mean, I'm also creative in a lot of other ways, but I think the thread of like creativity and confidence, they might be correlated. Because if you don't know what you're doing, what are your thoughts on that? If you don't know what you're doing, you can be creative enough to essentially think about different solutions.
Yeah, sometimes I think those constraints to like help you to like when you don't know certain things, those constraints help you come up with a creative solution to a problem. I mean, simplifying things is a lot of what I spend a lot of time on too. Like, and usually that's just in my head way before I start a project. As I'm slowly, it seems impossible, and then you start chipping away at the bits and trying to figure out where they connect and finding that simple solution. I think a lot of times constraints can actually be like a powerful tool to use in finding those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Isaac always talks about what's the simple possible, like strip it down to the base core of it and then build from there.
If only because I can't fit anything else more complicated in my head. But yeah, I feel that.
I mean, we started Threadless with $500. I mean, it was like, we found a $12 a month hosting company and just kind of figured out how to do all these things.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine it like that even being possible, but it is. I don't know how
that makes me so happy, honestly. Like, I don't know. Thank you for talking about any of this. Like, one of my favorite things is seeing something that from anyone else's perspective, like wasn't even supposed to be a thing, like seeing it come into existence and grow. And from an outsider's perspective, like that's what the work of Threadless looks like to me. Like it was an idea that maybe was always meant to be, and this is how it found its way into the world. This is entirely my language for it, and I don't wish to project a definition whatsoever. So I don't know. Like, what do you think about what thread? How do I want to ask this question? For something that was never meant to be a business, now existing and being so like permanent in the world in so many ways, how does that feel?
I mean, it feels. There were some interesting times in Threadless's history where the initial business model was very novel because the design challenges allowed us to overcome minimum order quantities, basically. And I didn't really look at it that way. That's not why I built it, but that's why, crowdsourcing became this buzzword. And it's like, the business is taught as a Harvard case study, to MBA students. And a lot of it's about that. And then our entire novel business model became kind of irrelevant when digital printing came to be, because then you can just there's no more minimum order quantities. It's units of one, and it's at the same quality and cost as, mass produced stuff. And so we kind of had to pivot at that moment to figure out where do we sit. And it came back to this core, and we were starting to learn, like you mentioned, when the word make came in, that was before we made this pivot, but that's really what we're about, is just making cool stuff with friends. And it's not like design challenges to overcome minimum order quantities is required to do that. I mean, we also started to take ourselves a little too seriously, I think, during those crowdsourcing years where we were being taught at like MIT and Stanford and stuff. And then we took it back to the core, and now we built this new platform called Artist Shops that leverages make on demand printing. And a lot of it's been about finding that reason why we exist. Now I forget what the original question was, but
okay. Man, that makes me happy. Oh my gosh.
I guess I'm thinking about like the phrase that comes into my mind, like, what is the magic sauce of, like, you talked about, not taking yourself too seriously, yet like you still have to run a business, and like you're getting recognition and case studies from these global institutions that are well known around the world.
Both Harvard and Empowered Human Academy. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I mean, just wait, y'all. It's going to be good. So I guess and as an introvert and as a leader, right? So you're on the cusp of this, like, kind of, it's growing, and it has grown, and you've done it for 20 years. And I feel like your journey has just been like so non-traditional in terms of like, you didn't get your MBA. You're not a traditional, you said you're taking yourself too seriously during all this. I'm curious, like, I guess, like, what is the, magic sauce, like the recipe to make all this work? You know what I mean? Because I feel like, well, let me first start with the question. Do you, as an introvert and as a leader, ever get lonely? You were talking about getting, together and making things with your friends, but has there ever been a part of your journey where you felt lonely?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of a pinpoint, like an example of a moment like that. But there are, I'd say a lot of the lonely moments are, sometimes when you have knowledge about a challenge and it's inappropriate to share it and work through it with another person, especially somebody either, at the company, and, it's good to have a support system outside of your business for those types of challenges that can be trusted. But I don't always have that, didn't always have that. And, so those are probably the lonely moments when it's like, also sometimes, in a position of privilege and power that I'm in, I think with this it feels like you can't, or that you shouldn't share some of those challenges. Like, it's kind of just not appropriate.
Yeah,
I feel like
sometimes.
So
how do you get through that loneliness? Has it affected you, like, personally in your personal life? Like, stress levels go up, you can't sleep, like, and how do you deal with that?
I would say I feel very lucky to have my wife be so involved in this business, and we're able to be very open with each other about those sorts of challenges. And she's like my rock on those kinds of things. But it is. I mean, I think I do have a few resources outside of the company that, like, I'm in a group that we meet every 2 weeks, and it's like 6 of us, and we all share the things that we're all going through. And,
cool.
So that's been super helpful.
So community is super important to you, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
Check me on my comprehension here. It sounds, what I heard was that the reasons that might cause you to feel lonely are the actual opposite of the things that you like doing, like making things with friends and being transparent and all that. Like whenever you aren't able to do that, that feels bad. Is that oversimplifying?
No, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, I do like, I can't like put on a face very well. People know if I'm not good. And so
totally
same. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm super, super curious about the step down from CEO and the step back up. So like, I don't know, that subject seems exciting to me that you would even consider either one of those options. And so I really want to know, to whatever extent you're willing to explain here or enlighten us, what was that like? What went into each decision?
Well, I think I was kind of coached towards that direction by our investor, but I also think that it felt right in that moment too. It was right around the time we were having our first kid, and I was really wanting to move to Colorado at the time because I had lived there growing up, and it was always my favorite place. And I also was feeling like I couldn't really do the maker side of my job efficiently. I was really burning myself on both ends. I mean, I would spend all day as a manager and then go home and like code all night, and I never really found the balance there. So I kind of felt like I could, in this moment, I could choose one, and so went in on the maker side through this transition, but then realized that, I don't know, there was some writing that I read and some stories that I heard about just the fact that Steve Jobs was like a product focused CEO, I think helped me feel that needed to be the way our company needed to go. Through going through the process. And similarly with the move to Colorado, realized we needed to be here. Going through that process, I think helped make it more clear to me why I needed to be in this position.
Yeah. How do you think about serving yourself and optimizing for yourself and optimizing for others? Like Threadless is very much let's create value for and around others. How do you think about that for yourself?
I definitely feel like if I'm not servicing myself, I can't be of service to others. And that's something I learned the hard way. And I mean, I think those days that I spent burning the candle on both ends was not good for the company. And so, I mean, we have a very, like working at Threadless is actually not crazy in terms of hours and commitment to, how much you're working. We're a pretty down to earth company when it comes to that, including myself. I work regular hours. I take lots of vacation. And I think it makes us a better business as part of it.
Yeah, I feel that balance is super important.
Going back to stepping back into the CEO role, were you like, raise my hand, I'm ready now, or like give us a little context about what that looked like specifically, or if you can?
Yeah. Well, coming back, it kind of like the company started to have a bit of a decline. And the person I hired was having a child and wanted to move to California. So it was kind of this moment that allowed me to come back, and it ended up being a mutual decision. And I'm still, we're the CEO that I hired, we're still on really great terms. He was on our board for many years after, and was a mentor of mine. So yeah, it worked out really well. I think that's another thing I've learned over the years is like, just respecting people's journeys in and out of businesses, and how, like, I mean, there were a few years where, you know, if somebody were to quit or if I had to fire somebody, it was like the worst thing in the world. And I couldn't imagine anything. And then you see people like you, Isaac, I mean, going on to just doing amazing things after leaving the business. And it's just like, yeah, not everybody's life needs to be like at Threadless for the rest of the, you know, I mean, that was a thing that I learned over time. And,
you didn't get fired, did you?
I this is where it comes out.
Well, I think I
didn't, for the record.
He did not, for the record.
Right.
So what I find interesting about all this, and is this kind of non-traditional journey, you started with friends, and you have a flexible, not a grinding, 90 hours a week, work culture, and you left as a CEO and then you came back. He's your mentor now. And like, I just love this as a representation of the journey being different for everyone and being okay with it being what it is. My question to you is, how has mentorship and kind of community that you can look for, you talked about your group that you meet with every 2 weeks, how has that impacted you, and why do you think it's important to have that? How has it been important in your life?
I think that's an area that I could be better at, both as a giver and a receiver for a mentor. I think I actually taught like a college class one year in the Art Institute in Chicago. Cool. There was a teacher there that got deported. And so I took over the position like a week before class was to start, and did, one semester of being a teacher. And I feel like I am a terrible teacher and it's something I need to get better at. And then, I don't ask for help a lot. And it's definitely, it feels outside my comfort zone to do so. I think this group that I'm in, definitely joining it was a very uncomfortable thing for me. And every 2 weeks before we go into it, I do start to get like anxious, but then coming out of it, I feel really good, so I know it's something I need to do. But it's something I have to really actively do for myself. It's not something that comes natural to me.
That's super interesting to me, especially in alongside, what you've been saying about how like I can figure it out. That's the thing that I know I can do. And so I don't know, this is compelling to me, hearing that the uncomfortable, anxious going in space of interacting with other people, that that to be useful. I don't have a specific question. I think I just want to learn more about this. And to add a little background to the question, I have a personal theory that there are like things we come into this life just knowing, and there are other things that we are here to figure out. So maybe with that as the background, can you tell me more about the inner knowledge that like I can figure it out, alongside coaching and mentoring? These are also things that I choose.
Yeah, maybe there's a correlation there. Like maybe I'd feel confident because I'm afraid to ask for help.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think I do like to read a lot from, I guess, inspirational figures that have, like, I read a lot of business books or motivational books, but I don't directly, reach out to people to have conversations about those kinds of things. Although I do have a couple of really close friends where, we have very deep conversations about sort of things like that. But I guess it's probably the hard part is getting to the comfortable place with somebody to have conversations on that level. It takes a lot of time and trust.
Are there things, so especially with I know I can figure it out thing, are there things that you want that feel inaccessible, or that or that you haven't, or that you think they're hard to get to? Or are your desire, like, is there usually like a pretty straightforward path to the thing that you want? Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe one thing, like raising money is something that's never come natural to me, and I've never really done it. And the company's bootstrapped, and so I can figure it out approach during that for that problem is like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need the money. I can figure it out without it, you know? Whereas somebody else may think, yeah, I can figure out how to raise money, I guess.
Sure.
Like sometimes figuring the thing out is almost like circumventing the problem entirely. Maybe.
That's okay. I'm making a guess in the dark here that sometimes you've chosen to circumvent and sometimes you've chosen to do other things. Maybe. Why do one or the other? Like, why did you choose to? I'm guessing there are financial reasons, but I'm speaking too much. Why choose to do a thing that feels uncomfortable, that you don't know how to do, that you might have to involve other people in?
I don't know. I guess it felt more natural. And yeah, maybe it felt a little too overwhelming to even try to go down that path yeah.
Cool. Love that.
I appreciate you thinking about it and answering the question. Okay. So a lot of this conversation has been, around Threadless. Okay, this feels like a question that I draw from a deck of cards, but why not? What's true about you that isn't true about Threadless?
Great question.
Yeah, that is good. I guess, there's nothing that's really like popping out.
That's interesting, right? Like, is Threadless then like a function of Jake Nickel being in the world? For you anyway, like I imagine your employees might have a different personal relationship, but for you.
Yeah, I think it does stem from me a lot, and it kind of sucks that that's the case. Actually, I don't feel good about that. I don't know. I don't like to Threadless was started to be like this kind of democratic like system where anybody could come in and be a part of it. And I feel weird about it being so tied to myself, but I think it is kind of true. Like its person, if you were to meet Threadless on the street, its personality is like, it's probably going to be pretty close to mine.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot with our company. We're like,
really?
Is it Lightword or is it Abe and Isaac or is it both? Is it all? Because you've been feeding your heart and soul into this for 20 years. How can it not be? I think, I don't know. For me, I think it's just an entrepreneurial thing. Like it's your baby. It's your friend. It's you. For me at least, I feel like you put so much time and thought and energy and blood, sweat, and tears and everything into it. I think it has to be some part of us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What were you going to say?
If the person that you meet on the street, if you were to meet Threadless, if Threadless personified is like Jake to some extent or similar to you, how does it, and if that's uncomfortable to you, how does it feel then knowing that like there's a community around Threadless that loves what Threadless is and that's been true for a long time?
That feels good.
Okay.
But I think actually maybe an answer to the original question is I don't think I necessarily have the same art style or like appreciate maybe some of the things I would personally choose would never get printed on Threadless or be highlighted by Threadless.
Yeah.
And so I think that speaks maybe to like the diversity of our community is just been
that makes sense.
Global from day one, and having so many different styles on there is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
I love that. You were talking about just going back to the question of, identity and business that you're creating. I think of, have you heard of Whole30? It's like paleo, but it's just kind of like 30-day. So Melissa Urban is a co-founder of the program. And she's like, listen, like the company has changed and the rules have changed because I've changed as a leader. I used to be really hard and rigid and like, this is what it is. But I've since softened up and I also know more a lot about like D&I stuff and, equity in terms of food. So like the company has changed because I've changed as well. And I think the things that we build are kind of an extension of what's going on inside. And that's just another thought that I had. I have a pulling a question out of the deck for you.
It's not, for those who are not watching on YouTube, it's not a literal deck. These are actual questions. Continue.
Coming out of my brain deck.
Cool.
What brings you hope every day?
I think, definitely the thing that brings me hope every day is our artist community, all the people on there, and what kind of blows my mind still today is that there's so many people in the world that want art on things like t-shirts and stuff. That blew my mind from the beginning when I started as a hobby. There was I grew up mostly in Northwest Indiana, and I had never seen art on a t-shirt before Threadless and didn't think anybody would care. I was only wearing like music t-shirts, or there was brands. If you walk into the mall, you could buy a corporate logo on your t-shirt, but art on a t-shirt, didn't think anybody would care.
Same. When I met Isaac, it was a couple years after he met, it was a couple years after he left Threadless, but, I was the corporate, American Eagle, Abercrombie, whatever. And he was like, yeah, well, you got to buy more trendy graphic tees. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, what do you mean trendy graphic tees? My trendy was like, like Abercrombie or whatever, you know what I mean? So I just can relate to that. That's really amazing though.
I do there's some brands that I think are, when they're aspirational, like a Patagonia or something, the meaning behind them is more than just like the brand name. I can get behind
Totally. Oh, I'm still a brand guy. I wear like Victoria Beckham everything. So
we contain multitudes. Tell me about the physical space that you're in right now. You're in your office studio or something. Tell me about the space and what you've chosen to surround yourself with here.
Yeah, I'm in my house. We're up in the spare bedroom. And when we bought this house, this room, I think, is haunted. The door locks from the inside or from the outside. The floor is painted a different color. All the walls were this room just it was not a part of the rest of the house. I don't know why.
Okay.
But converted it into an office because Threadless has gone remote now. So I work full time from home. Yeah. But yeah, we're going to do a construction project up here at some point and kind of expand the room into a closet that's next door.
And the specific art that you've got in the room, because I'm seeing a ton of it. Why that stuff?
Yeah. So there's a little statue of this artist that Jeremyville is the name of the artist, and he made this for Threadless that's supposed to be a representation of a Threadless artist.
Oh my gosh, cool.
A little notebook and pencil and stuff.
Yeah.
The print behind me, or the painting behind me, is the first design we ever printed, Control Z.
I knew that was familiar. Awesome. Yes.
Awesome. How special.
We had a retail store in Wrigleyville kind of area. And we painted, there was a staff artist, Joe Suda, who worked at Threadless, and he would paint 3 pieces every week to go in the store window of this size. And there were mashups of the designs that came out that week, because we used to release new designs every Monday. And this was one of the first ones. And then I have this You Are Beautiful piece by Matthew Hoffman. He does the little You Are Beautiful stickers.
He created a You Are Love sticker for our wedding, specifically for our wedding, in that style. Is really cool.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I have his little calendar here too. Every day
so awesome.
But yeah, there's some other pieces. There's this piece by Guncho. He's got a shop up on Threadless, but I think I bought that piece in 2004 or something.
Cool.
There's a bronzed Threadless t-shirt.
Oh my gosh. Incredible.
Oh my gosh. I want that. Wow. Amazing. What I have loved about this conversation is, seeing the humanity behind, the company, the person leading the company that I saw, at Target on a card, deck. I just love seeing the humanity behind what's going on. Because a lot of people just see a logo or see a product and they're like, well, it's so easy to judge, but I find it so beautiful, the art and the creation and the humanity behind that. And just the idea that, it doesn't need to look a certain way in order for it to be good. Especially, you know, you were like, let's not take ourselves so seriously, like when we're doing all this Harvard, MIT stuff. I love that because I feel like as a person who grew up in the suburbs, you know, not knowing anything about entrepreneurship or not knowing anything about just what I saw like Sears right down the road and, you know, this corporate America. And not that anything's bad with that at all, but I think it just is a beautiful representation and invitation for people to dream about what can be, because truly anything can be. We end our conversations off with two questions. First, what does an empowered Jake look like and feel like?
I think I would feel more empowered if, I don't know, that a lot of it is just the weight of some of the responsibility. If I could shed some of that, it feels sometimes that can be overwhelming a lot.
Well, and just to slightly redirect the question, like when you are in a space of empowerment, like when you're feeling yourself and you're ready and you're on and you are doing it, what does that look like and feel like?
I think when I feel just very confident about the decisions that I'm making being something that I know isn't, well, not necessarily that it won't fail, but it's the it feels like the right decision to make. Like I'm not really second guessing myself in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Amazing.
And this connects very naturally to the next question. What do you know for sure?
Nothing.
Cool. Would you like to go into any detail on that at all, or shall we just do a mic drop moment right there?
No, I'm always learning and questioning everything. And yeah, I'm honestly not. I think everything could be wrong.
I love it. Many people have said nothing on our podcast.
That is actually kind of a theme. Yeah,
it's kind of a theme.
Jake, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you and what you've done, and that you've elected to spend a few minutes here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
For everyone looking for awesome art and inspiration, check out Threadless. And thank you so much, Jake, for your time. We will be chatting with you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Bye. This podcast is the work of Lightward, our company, named for that toward the light direction which informs every single thing that we do, including money, which means, like everything else, the way we earn revenue is not based on industry norms. It's based on what feels deeply right and aligned by passing through the door that feels like it has more behind it, not less. And the way we keep this podcast going is all Lightward. It's pay what feels good. It's an exchange of value between you and us. We're keeping conventional podcast advertising totally out of this. And here's how Pay What Feels Good works. We give you this episode because it feels good to do so. And you consider, honestly, what number of dollars this episode is genuinely worth to you. I do not care if that's $3, $1,000, or literally $0 and a heart emoji, as long as that trade genuinely makes your day better. And the energy there is the entire point. That is what we're building our business on. No advertisers, no selling your attention, just you and us, trading value in a way that builds us both up. So whatever the number, when you're done listening, head to empoweredhumanacademy.com and hit the Pay What Feels Good button. We use this policy across all of our company's work, and I'm really excited to bring it here to the world of podcasts. This is us voting for the world we want to see. Thank you for being here.